Welcome to today's historical deep dive. Ever wonder how close the world came to changing course in a split second? History isn't just dusty books. It's the echo of thunder and the chilling touch of ambition. If you love immersive, real storytelling about ambition and downfall, hit like and subscribe. It helps us more than you know. Drop a comment with your favorite Napoleon quote or the moment that shocked you most. Let's begin and change the way you think about history. Section 1. The Infernal Machine. Chaos breeds ambition. You are in Paris, December 24th, 1800. The air bites with the chill of winter, sharper than any blade. Carriages rattle over cobblestones, the sound swallowed by the night. Gaslight flickers, casting long, dancing shadows that seem to hide secrets. You, Napoleon Bonaparte, First Consul of France, are en route to the opera with Josephine, cocooned in the familiar comfort of your carriage. Suddenly, a deafening blast tears through the night on Rue Saint-Nicaise. It's not the distant rumble of a storm. This is thunder made of gunpowder, nails, and shrapnel, raw and immediate. Horses scream, a sound that drills into your bones. Glass shatters, fragments raining down like deadly ice. Buildings groan, wounded stone and timber protesting the sudden violence. This isn't just noise, it's an infernal machine, an assassination attempt by royalist conspirators. Your carriage, delayed only slightly by your driver's hesitant turn onto the street, misses the worst of it by mere seconds. A twist of fate thinner than tissue paper. But the street is carnage, mangled bodies lying amidst rubble, the air thick with the acrid, metallic smell of sulfur and blood. This vivid, horrifying scene isn't just an attack you survived. It's a potent catalyst, a lightning strike that illuminates a brutal truth. It shatters any illusion of stable, republican peace you might have held. Your life, the perceived stability of the nation you govern, hangs by a thread, terrifyingly vulnerable to desperate plots. The insight is immediate and brutal, etched into your mind by the screams still echoing in the night. Power. However absolute it feels in grand halls and official decrees, is fragile when its holder is merely a man, susceptible to a simple bomb. The republic you ostensibly serve offers no inherent, protected, almost sacred status for its leader. It's a contract, not a divine right. The reflection hardens in your mind, cold and clear amidst the chaos. How can power be made indestructible? How can the leader transcend mere mortality and political vulnerability? The attack doesn't just threaten your life. It plants a seed, dark and fertile, the desperate need for a form of power, so formidable, so historically grounded, so seemingly divine, that no earthly plot could shake its foundations. This bloody night on Rue Saint-Nicaise doesn't just underscore danger. It pushes the quiet ambition for more, from a distant possibility to a perceived necessity, a matter of survival. Ask yourself, when survival demands transcendence, does a mere title suffice? You stand before the Directory, a body rotting with corruption, a government adrift in the chaotic wake of revolution. France gasps for air, choked by instability, longing for the firm hand you promise. The air in the Tuileries is thick with desperation and intrigue. Then, the Council of 500, a chamber erupting in a storm of shouts and accusations. They see not the savior, but the usurper. Traitor, outlaw him. The cries rain down. You falter for a moment, overwhelmed not by fear, but by the sheer animalistic chaos you've come to tame. Your brother, Lucien, saves the day with theatrical flourish, claiming assassins threaten you. The grenadiers enter, bayonets fixed, not as symbols of the people's will, but as the stark, unyielding instruments of yours. The deputies scatter like startled pigeons. The coup is complete. The Republic, exhausted, accepts the twilight. You are hailed, paradoxically, as the man who ended the revolution by force, yet preserved its gains. The consulate is born from this moment of controlled chaos, its lifeblood, the yearning for order. First Consul you become, then swiftly, irrevocably, First Consul for life. The mask of republicanism is thin, transparent even, yet France exhales in weary relief. A decade of upheaval, the terror, the Directory's fecklessness, the endless war, has left the nation craving stability more than abstract ideals. This is where the relentless work begins. The scene is not the battlefield now, but the study, illuminated late into the night. Decrees are signed. The administrative machinery is centralized with astonishing speed and efficiency. You are a whirlwind of bureaucratic energy, building the apparatus of a modern state from the ground up. The prefects, the consolidated tax system, the Bank of France, pillars of a centralized authority, and of course, the civil code. This monumental legal framework, your enduring legacy, rationalizes the law, sweeps away feudal relics. It is presented as the codification of revolutionary equality, but it is also a tool of absolute control, binding the nation under a single, uniform rule emanating from you. Here is the crucial, almost tragic insight. The explosive energy unleashed by the pursuit of liberty, equality, and fraternity is being expertly, ruthlessly harnessed for counter-revolutionary ends. The yearning for order, for a strong hand, for tangible results, like victory and a functioning economy, makes a populace willing to trade hard-won freedoms for perceived security and glory. The revolutionary flame is not extinguished, but redirected, channeled into building an edifice of personal power. Ask yourself, when does the necessary consolidation of power become its corrosive monopolization? What amount of liberty are you willing to relinquish for a guarantee of safety and efficiency? The reflection is a stark, necessary caution. Be profoundly wary when stability is elevated above all other virtues, for it is so often the eloquent excuse used to dismantle the very checks and balances that protect liberty from the savior's tightening grip. You, Napoleon, are that indispensable, adored figure. You hold the Republic's future, fragile as glass, in your hands. And that grip is tightening, not in service to the shared, messy ideals you once seemed to embody, but to a singular, soaring ambition that sees the state not as a collective endeavor, but as a personal instrument. Not everyone cheered. Across France, genuine Republicans, those who bled for the overthrow of monarchy, watched with growing unease. Men like General Moreau, a hero whose campaigns echoed the glory of Italy, stood as a living embodiment of the revolution's ideals, a rival not just in military repute, but in principle. Moreau spoke with quiet disapproval of your burgeoning power, your increasingly monarchical style, your calculated steps away from the fraternity they had fought for. His very existence, his untarnished reputation earned on battlefields, and his principled dissent was a threat you could not abide. The stage is set in 1804. A royalist plot against your life is uncovered. A real threat, yes, but one you expertly manipulate. Suddenly, Moreau's name is whispered, then shouted, linked, tenuously at first, then firmly, to the conspiracy. You orchestrate the scene, turning the discovery of a plot against you into an opportunity to purge those within France who challenged your authority, not with bombs or daggers, but with their integrity. The trial of Moreau is not a quest for justice. It is a performance designed to break a symbol. The charges are trumped up, the evidence circumstantial at best, woven together by your police chief, Fouché, a man who understood the utility of fear. A celebrated general, a national hero, is forced from the country he helped save, his reputation systematically tarnished by your carefully orchestrated propaganda machine. Ballads and pamphlets paint him as a traitor, a Republican wolf in royalist sheep's clothing, funded by England. The insight here is chilling, brutal in its clarity. Consolidated power cannot tolerate independent virtue or alternative centers of loyalty. Dissent, even passive or principled dissent born from the very ideals the regime supposedly represents, must be neutralized. Your ambition required a political landscape cleared not just of active enemies, but of potential rivals, and perhaps more dangerously, moral critics who reminded people of what they had lost. The reflection is timeless, etched in the forced departure of a hero. The path to absolute power is paved with the silencing of those who remember the original ideals. When a leader fears noble opposition more than genuine external enemies, the foundation of their authority shifts fundamentally, from the brittle promise of consent to the cold, unyielding grip of coercion. The exile of Moreau wasn't just a political maneuver to remove a rival. It was a public declaration delivered from the courtroom steps. The revolutionary fraternity, the brotherhood of principle, was dead, replaced by an absolute, singular loyalty to one man, to you. Ask yourself, was this a necessary act of statecraft, or the first fatal compromise of your own ideals? What does it cost a leader to exile virtue? The air in the chamber feels thick, heavy with unvoiced suggestion. It's late 1803, maybe early 1804. You sit at the head of the table, ostensibly listening to matters of state with your council or the Senate. But the true agenda circulates like a subtle poison in the room. The whispers, once faint echoes in the corridors of power, have grown louder, bold enough now to be spoken carefully, tentatively, in this trusted space. The words are not direct, never that blunt at first. They speak of stability, of securing the future, of the vulnerability exposed by plots like the Rue Saint-Nicaise bombing, where your carriage was targeted. Then it comes, cloaked in necessity, from the lips of men whose fortunes are tied inextricably to yours. Someone clears their throat, leans forward, proposing not the word empire yet, but the need to establish a hereditary system, to solidify the state, to prevent future chaos, to guarantee continuity. The language has shifted subtly around you for months. They no longer call you citizen consul as often. The more sycophantic among them test the waters with "Sire," watching your reaction. Pamphlets, conveniently appearing in public discourse, argue that only a return to hereditary rule can truly anchor the nation after the revolutionary storms. You listen, impassive. Your face reveals little, perhaps a thoughtful frown, a slow nod. You do not jump at the suggestion. You feign a calculated reluctance, a weariness with the burdens of state, hinting that this burden of absolute power, of a crown, is something others are pressing upon you for the good of France. You allow the idea to hang in the air, to be debated, to germinate in the political consciousness you have so carefully cultivated. This isn't a spontaneous eruption of public will. It's a strategic, soft launch, a probe into the nation's willingness to abandon the core principle of the revolution for a glittering, ancient symbol of power they had so violently cast down. This incremental normalization of the previously unthinkable, the return of monarchy after a revolution dedicated to its destruction, reveals a profound insight about ambition and power. It doesn't typically storm the castle gates without first testing the foundation. It floats radical ideas under the guise of security, necessity, or popular demand, often manufactured. It grooms the environment, making the once shocking seem merely practical, even inevitable, before making its final, decisive move. Ask yourself, how often do we see today, in politics and power structures, radical shifts introduced tentatively, gaining acceptance through repetition and a lack of forceful, principled opposition? The whisper of the crown wasn't just sound. It was a careful, strategic probe. It was the seed of empire being planted, not by the hand of fate, but by the deliberate actions of men who understood that even the most radical transformation begins with a quiet suggestion, tested in the receptive silence of ambition. You stand in the reception chamber, the heavy velvet curtains muting the sounds of Paris outside. An Austrian envoy is speaking, his words carefully polite, yet laced with a subtle, almost imperceptible condescension. He acknowledges your influence, your control over France, but the title, First Consul, seems to catch in his throat, lacking the resonant weight of king or emperor. His posture, the slight tilt of his head, speaks volumes of the centuries-old lineage he represents, compared to your meteoric, revolutionary rise. You are Napoleon, master of France by will and victory, not by birthright. Across every border sit monarchs whose bloodlines stretch back further than the French Republic itself. They see you as the ultimate parvenu, a Corsican adventurer who clawed his way to power through the chaos they despise. The revolution that propelled you is, in their eyes, an act of sacrilege, regicide. Your power is undeniable, formidable, but historically shallow in a world that still bows to divine right. The coldness in their eyes, the veiled references to stability rooted in history, it's a constant reminder that you stand outside their ancient club. This isn't just political disagreement. It's an existential challenge to your authority. Your position, though dominant now, lacks the ingrained, almost genetic legitimacy of inherited thrones. It feels powerful, yes, but inherently vulnerable to the contempt and resistance of the old order. They plot, they scheme, not just to curb your power, but to delegitimize you, to wait for the moment the usurper inevitably falls. This gnawing hunger for validation from the very system you overturned reveals a profound truth about ambition. It doesn't merely crave power, it craves legitimacy, especially from those it seeks to surpass or replace. You didn't just want to rule France. You yearned to be seen as belonging to the historical lineage of rulers, to stand shoulder to shoulder with the Bourbons, the Habsburgs, the Romanovs, not as an exception, but as a peer. Ask yourself, was this craving for a crown pure vanity or a strategic calculation? Perhaps it was both. In a world defined by inherited power, The easiest way to neutralize the contempt of the old order wasn't to destroy them, but to join them on your own terms. True originality often challenges definitions. Insecure power, paradoxically, often seeks to conform to them, even while dominating. Your push towards an imperial title wasn't just personal ambition. It was a calculation born of the insecurity of a self-made man navigating a world built on inherited thrones. You sought the crown not just for glory, but as a shield against the world's most powerful form of dismissal, disinheritance. The robes of state feel heavy, but you crave the crown. The transition from consul for life to emperor cannot be a simple seizure. It requires theater, spectacle, the veneer of national yearning. You understand this implicitly. Power, you know, is strongest when it seems bestowed by the people themselves, even if those people are merely players in a drama you direct. The stage is set, the Senate, conveniently filled with men loyal to you, obligingly proposes the transformation from republic or its strained remnants to empire, with you at its head. Now comes the performance on a grander scale, the plebiscite, a nationwide vote. Across France, in village squares and bustling town halls, citizens are summoned to cast their ballots. But look closer. This is no quiet, private act of conscience. The voting is public. Local officials, hand-picked for their unwavering devotion, watch every move. The registers for yes votes are prominently displayed, easily accessible, often positioned right next to the official table, a clear path for assent. The registers for no, however, they might be tucked away in a corner, less visible, perhaps requiring an awkward step or a bold declaration under the eyes of those in charge. A subtle chill hangs in the air, a silent pressure guiding hands towards one column. The secret ballot, the bedrock of modern democratic freedom, is a concept yet to become standard practice, making this public display of allegiance or dissent a potent tool of control. The results arrive, a chorus of overwhelming yeses. Millions vote for the empire, for you. It is, on the surface, a thunderous endorsement. But the chilling insight here is how easily a popular mandate can be engineered. This isn't a genuine expression of the nation's desire. It's a demonstration of your masterful control over its mechanisms. By manipulating information flow, by creating an atmosphere of intimidation around dissent, by subtly rigging the very process of voting, the will of the people becomes a perfect reflection of the ruler's own will. It's a stark warning echoing through the centuries. True consent requires freedom from coercion and access to genuine alternatives. When the machinery of democracy is used merely to rubber stamp a predetermined outcome, it ceases to be an expression of freedom and becomes a performance, a charade masking absolute control. This plebiscite wasn't the nation choosing you. It was you displaying your power to orchestrate their choice. Ask yourself, how fragile is popular will when the levers of power are held by one ambitious hand? This vote, seemingly a step towards legitimization, was perhaps the moment you truly began to believe your own orchestrated narrative. The Tuileries Palace breathes again, not with the revolutionary fervor that once echoed through its halls, but with the stifled rustle of silk and the hushed murmurs of deference. You, Napoleon, now emperor, stand at the center of this resurrected universe. The plain citizen's coat is gone, replaced by embroidered velvet and the Legion of Honor's star. Around you, a new court takes shape, a deliberate, theatrical construction. This is no accident. It's a conscious engineering of power, a statement that the Republic, in its austere simplicity, was merely a stepping stone. Titles, once swept away by the revolutionary tide, are retrieved from the dustbin of history. Grand Chamberlain, Grand Marshal, Grand Huntsman. These echoes of Bourbon monarchy are brought back, dusted off, and assigned to loyal generals and politicians. The air thickens with formality. The simple address of citizen is replaced by sire or your imperial majesty. Ladies-in-waiting, decked in elaborate gowns, curtsy low, reviving an etiquette that feels both ancient and alien in this new France. Old aristocrats, those who fled the terror and the guillotines, now cautiously eye the rising sun in Paris. They trickle back from exile, their ancestral names and breeding a valuable commodity in this new hierarchy, willing to serve the man who embodies everything they once opposed but now offers a return to status. Yet, this isn't a simple restoration. It's a hybrid court. The rigid structure of military rank is woven into the revived aristocratic tapestry. A general might hold a grand office, his status a blend of battlefield achievement and courtly position. New nobles are minted, marshals become princes, ministers become dukes, their titles tied not to inherited land or lineage, but to your favor, your victories. Their fortunes, their very status is entirely dependent on the emperor's continued good graces. This creates a powerful class of dependents, their loyalty cemented by shared privilege and the knowledge that their elevation came solely from you. The palace buzzes with liveried servants, a constant visual reinforcement of wealth and hierarchy. Grand receptions are held, mirroring the elaborate rituals of monarchies past. The scene is set. The ruler is distant, elevated, surrounded by layers of formality and flattery. This deliberate recreation of monarchical pomp serves a crucial, cold purpose. Absolute power isn't just about issuing commands. It requires the visible symbols, the rigid structures that reinforce hierarchy and create an insurmountable distance between the sovereign and the populace, even between the sovereign and his closest advisors. The gold braid, the powdered wigs, the elaborate curtsies, they are not mere decoration. They are bricks being laid, a wall rising between the emperor and the revolutionary principles that paved his path. Consider the irony. The man who rose on the promise of liberty, equality, fraternity, now builds a court designed to emphasize inequality and distance. He replaces the frank, albeit sometimes chaotic debates of revolutionary assemblies with the controlled environment of the salon and the Council of State, where dissent is often unwelcome and flattery thrives. When leaders surround themselves with sycophants, those whose status relies entirely on agreeing with the master, and formality replaces frank counsel, they inevitably insulate themselves from reality. The information that reaches the top is filtered, softened, or spun to please. Ask yourself, is this transformation a necessary adaptation for ruling a vast empire? A practical recognition that you cannot lead millions with the informality of a revolutionary committee? Or is it the ultimate betrayal of those ideals? A chilling demonstration that power, when absolute, corrupts absolutely, trading principle for the glittering, isolating cage of the imperial court. The gold, the titles, the elaborate dance of the court. They reveal a man who understands the mechanics of power perhaps better than anyone, but who is beginning to trust the illusion of invincibility over the hard-won lessons of the revolution. The crown sits heavy, yet it's not enough. You've seized power through a coup, cemented it with popular acclaim, declared yourself emperor, but something vital is missing. The old order, though shattered by revolution, still echoes in the deep-seated faith of a populace wary of this new, self-made authority. You need a legitimacy deeper than the ballot box or the bayonet charge. You need, or at least must appear to have, the sanction of God Himself, bestowed through His representative on earth. This is the ultimate, daring play in your complex game of chess, bringing the spiritual realm under your strategic, political control. Enter Pope Pius VII, the frail, gentle vicar of Christ, reigning from Rome. You dispatch envoys, not with humble pleas for a blessing, but with demands veiled, ever so thinly, in the language of negotiation. Rome is far, yet your legions, your influence, stretch across the continent. You leverage the precarious political position of the Papal States, still recovering from French incursions, the lingering threat of future military action, and the promise of restoring certain church privileges within France. It's a masterclass in applying pressure, a velvet glove over an iron fist. The Pope, a man of faith thrust into a viper's nest of politics, resists. He pleads with his conscience and his advisors, but ultimately, facing potential ruin for the Church's temporal power, he must concede. No pope has journeyed from Rome to crown an emperor in Paris since Charlemagne, a millennium ago. This act, unprecedented in its boldness, screams significance. It declares to France and to Europe, this man, Napoleon Bonaparte, is not just another fleeting ruler born of chaos. He walks in the footsteps of Roman emperors, blessed by the ancient authority of the Catholic Church. His journey from Rome begins. It is emphatically not a voluntary pilgrimage of faith across the snow-dusted Alps. It is an orchestrated passage, meticulously managed and controlled by your agents every step of the way. French gendarmes and officials guide the papal entourage. Every stop, every planned public appearance, every greeting from local dignitaries is under your watchful, controlling eye. He is treated with immense formal ceremony, lavish meals, grand lodgings, yes, but the gilded cage is still undeniably a cage. Along the route northwards, despite the controls, crowds gather, awed by the sight of the pontiff, a figure embodying centuries of spiritual authority, stepping onto French soil at your explicit command. This journey is propaganda in motion, a living, moving tableau designed to demonstrate your supreme influence. Reaching even into the Sacred Heart of Europe, he arrives in Paris in late November 1804. Not like a triumphant spiritual leader entering a city eager for his blessing, but like a distinguished, deeply constrained guest of the state. The contrast is stark, almost tragically ironic. The embodiment of divine authority entering the heart of a nation that had recently renounced God, now here solely at the whim of its emperor. The air in the Tuileries Palace is thick with unspoken tension, a clash of spiritual weight and temporal power. You meet him, not with the kneeling reverence due to the Vicar of Christ, but with a calculated, almost cool respect. The meeting of two sovereigns, one earthly, one seeking the appearance of divine backing. Look closely at this scene. The frail, elderly pope, weary from the long, controlled journey, the living symbol of 2,000 years of church history, walking into your capital, entering your palace, under your complete control. This audacious decision, this relentless pursuit of spiritual legitimacy for your secular throne, reveals a profound, even chilling truth about power at its zenith. You understand the enduring power of symbols, the deep, resilient roots of faith in the human psyche, even after a revolution that tried to sever them. You are not a man driven by conventional religious piety, but you grasp the absolute political utility of religion. You seek here to graft the ancient, unquestionable legitimacy of the Church onto your brand-new, self-made empire. It is a deliberate, strategic attempt to borrow centuries of accumulated gravitas, to cloak the raw ambition of a Corsican general in the sacred robes of divine right, neatly updated for a post-revolutionary modern age. Consider the Pope's agonizing predicament. Forced from his sovereign seat, traveling across a continent dominated by the very man demanding his presence, surrounded by French agents, constantly aware of the power imbalance. Was this a blessing he was permitted to bestow, or spiritual authority brutally captured and paraded? The negotiation wasn't about theological fine points or the state of men's souls. It was a bare-knuckle political fight for leverage and image. You wanted the visual spectacle, the undeniable presence, the tacit approval of the highest spiritual office, but critically, without kneeling yourself. Indeed, you had already planned the symbolic act of taking the imperial crown from the altar and placing it upon your own head. A clear message that no one, not even the Pope, bestowed this power upon you. You took it. This entire maneuver stands as a potent warning, echoing through the corridors of history and into our present day. Be deeply wary when political power, craving legitimacy or control, seeks to co-opt or manipulate spiritual authority for its own secular ends. It rarely elevates the state or its leader. Almost without exception, it demeans both the political power that seeks to exploit faith and the faith it attempts to exploit. The Pope's reluctant journey to Paris wasn't a sacred pilgrimage. It was a calculated, brutal political statement. A visual demonstration of your power not just over kings and empires, but even, you seemed to suggest through this very act, over the Vicar of Christ himself. This powerful, unsettling image was precisely the one you intended to burn into the European consciousness, solidifying your unique, self-created place in history. Ask yourself, what would you have done standing in his boots, the Pope's, pressured and cornered, or Napoleon's, exercising such absolute dominance, facing such a calculated demand? The stage for this ultimate act of ambition was set. Notre Dame Cathedral. For months it had been transformed. The revolutionary scars etched into its stone, memories of Jacobin fury and desecration, were meticulously hidden, draped in swathes of fabric or patched over. In their place bloomed the new imperial iconography. Golden eagles, symbols of Roman power you consciously adopted, perched everywhere. Bees, ancient emblems of Merovingian kings, your subtle nod to a deeper, older French lineage than even the Bourbons, buzzed across velvet and banners. Your personal initial, the bold N, was emblazoned with inescapable prominence. A massive throne, a physical manifestation of your elevated status, was constructed. A monumental platform led to it, lifting you high above the assembled dignitaries, the military heroes, the subservient clergy. The cathedral, once a symbol of French faith and centuries of history, was fundamentally refashioned into a theater for your destiny. It was a breathtaking, audacious blend. Here within these ancient walls, you mandated the revolutionary oath to uphold the Republic, an oath now hollowed out by the very imperial crown you were about to place upon your head. side by side with rituals steeped in monarchical tradition older than the Caputs. The scene on the morning of December 2nd, 1804, within Notre Dame was heavy with this intentional paradox. The air, thick with incense and the scent of wealth and power, hung hushed with anticipation. The rustle of elaborate robes, the low murmur of the crowd, underscored the gravity and spectacle of the moment. This wasn't merely a religious ceremony or a political formality. It was a performance designed to reshape reality itself. This physical transformation of a sacred space underscores a profound insight into power. Leaders don't just occupy positions. They use architecture and symbolism to shape narrative and perception. You weren't just holding a coronation. You were crafting a historical tableau, investing yourself with the weight of centuries of French and Roman authority, while simultaneously declaring a completely new era, one defined by your own will. The decision to remake Notre Dame wasn't just about aesthetics. It was an act of claiming, of conquest. Notre Dame wasn't merely a backdrop. It was territory, remade in the image of your imperial ambition, a sacred vessel now housing the very secular power that had once sought to destroy it. Look closely at how leaders use public spaces and historical symbols. Are they genuinely respecting tradition, or are they strategically hijacking it, bending its meaning and power to serve their own immediate agenda? Notre Dame on that December day offers a stark lesson in the latter. It became a potent symbol, not of inherited right or divine sanction, but of power asserted, tradition manipulated, and history rewritten in gold and velvet. Ask yourself, when tradition is invoked in the public square today, whose story is truly being told, and whose purpose does it serve? December 1804. The day arrives, not with the unpredictable fury of battle, but with the chilling precision of a planned event. The cold air bites, yet it is thick with the orchestrated roar, the cheers of the controlled crowd lining the streets from the Tuileries Palace. Here, you and Josephine step into a magnificent, specially designed carriage, an edifice of gilded wood and velvet, drawn by a team of 8 powerful horses, a number steeped in regal tradition. The procession begins, an immense, slow-moving river of state power. Soldiers in their finest parade uniforms march with crisp discipline. Dignitaries in their robes of office follow, civil officials swelling the ranks. This is not mere transport to Notre Dame. It is a calculated, moving tableau, a display choreographed down to the last detail, designed to awe the populace and silence dissent before a single word is spoken at the altar. You sit within this rolling palace, wearing a coat of rich velvet, embroidered not with revolutionary symbols, but with golden bees, an ancient Merovingian emblem hearkening back to France's first kings. On your head sits not a modern hat, but a laurel wreath, consciously echoing the emperors of ancient Rome, a clear visual declaration of ambition. The journey through Paris unfolds as a river of gold, color, and sound, a potent visual manifestation of the power you now wield, a conscious, deliberate echo of royal processions of a past you purportedly overthrew. This public spectacle provides a stark insight. Power, to be unassailable, thrives on visible demonstration. Pomp and grandeur are not simply excess or vanity in this context. They are tools of control, instruments of legitimacy. They are designed to impress, to inspire awe, and to project an image of authority so grand it seems divinely ordained, or at least unchallengeable by mortal hand. You understood this instinctively, perhaps better than any ruler since the Sun King himself, that seeing was believing, that the visual narrative you constructed was as important, perhaps more so, than the political reality being shaped. The reflection is pertinent even now. Be acutely aware of the performance inherent in leadership at any level. When does necessary presentation, the projecting of confidence and competence, cross the line into excessive display? When does the grandeur become a mask designed to hide insecurity or distract from a lack of genuine substance? The procession wasn't merely transport. It was a declaration, a carefully constructed piece of theater announcing the arrival of a new monarchical age, draped, with subtle irony, in the guise of revolutionary achievement. Ask yourself, how much of what you see in leadership today is substance, and how much is just the gilded carriage rolling by? Inside the majestic, cold stone embrace of Notre Dame Cathedral, Pope Pius VII sits upon a smaller, less imposing throne near the altar. He waits. Hours, perhaps, stretch in the echoing space. He came as agreed, traveling from Rome, a journey fraught with political tension and delicate negotiation. His purpose? To perform the sacred unction, the ancient anointing with holy oil that mirrors the coronations of emperors past. He is the spiritual anchor, the living link to centuries of tradition and divine right. But you, Napoleon, had ensured he would not perform the most central, the most defining act. The scene is the long, perhaps awkward wait of the pontiff, as your immense procession makes its slow, deliberate way through the vast cathedral nave. He is there, a necessary prop for the grand ceremony, a validation in the eyes of a deeply Catholic nation and continent. But he is queerly not in control. He is spiritual power made subservient, for this moment, to secular ambition. This deliberate arrangement, the head of the universal church sitting patiently while the secular leader takes his time, highlights a pointed, uncomfortable insight. Absolute power seeks to dominate all other forms of authority, even those it pretends to honor and leverage. You brought the Pope not to be blessed by him, but to use his very presence to bless yourself in the eyes of the world, to lend an almost divine legitimacy to your self-made empire. His passive, waiting role underscores your active, assertive seizure of power. The reflection here is critical. When a leader compels symbols of deep moral or traditional authority to stand by while they orchestrate their rise, it reveals a deep-seated, insecure need to control the narrative entirely, even at the cost of disrespecting the very traditions they invoke. The Pope's waiting wasn't just a matter of liturgical protocol. It was a visible sign of the Church bent, in that moment, to the will of the state, a powerful symbolic humiliation in the service of your dazzling self-coronation. You weren't asking for the keys to heaven. You were demanding they unlock your earthly throne. What does it say about power, that it must diminish even the sacred to elevate itself? Ask yourself, is this the necessary theater of statecraft, or a chilling display of contempt for any power beyond one's own? The air in Notre Dame is thick with anticipation, heavy with incense and the weight of centuries. Pope Pius VII is here, the vicar of Christ himself, a living link to divine authority, brought all the way from Rome to bestow upon you the crown. the legitimacy of God, of tradition, of history, it's all supposed to flow through his hands. But you, Napoleon, stand on the dais, your gaze sweeping across the assembled dignitaries, the generals, the church hierarchy. You see the crown of Charlemagne, an artifact whispering tales of empire, waiting on the altar cushion. A cardinal holds it, ready for the Pope's touch, but your hand moves first. It is a swift, decisive motion that seems to slice through the ceremony's slow reverence. You reach past the cardinal, past the waiting pontiff. Your fingers close around the heavy, jeweled circlet. It feels solid, cold, real, far more tangible than any divine rite. You lift it, turning not towards the Pope, but towards the hushed silence of the basilica, towards the vast space you now command. And with deliberate certainty, you place it, not waiting for God, but upon your own brow. A collective breath is held. This is not succession. This is not election. This is appropriation. You have not inherited power. You have taken it. You have not received blessing. You have conferred it upon yourself. The message is stark, echoing off the ancient stones. Authority is not granted. It is seized. It's a move that screams of the self-made man, the one who clawed his way from obscurity to empire, utterly unwilling to let anyone else, not even the earthly representative of the Almighty, validate his destiny. He alone is the architect of his fate, the source of his own power. Then, in a softer but equally symbolic gesture, you take a smaller crown, lighter but still gleaming with purchased legitimacy, and place it upon the head of Josephine, who kneels before you. Your power flows not just upward from your own will, but outward, defining the status and destiny of those around you. This defining moment lays bare a core principle of your rise. The ultimate trust rests only in the self. It bypasses centuries of tradition, the divine right of kings, the consent of the governed, reducing the Pope to a mere prop in a drama where you are the sole protagonist. It is the ultimate declaration of sovereignty, a binding of your fate entirely to the strength of your own will, your own actions. Ask yourself, is this the apex of human agency? A brilliant, defiant rejection of outdated power structures? Or is it born from a deep-seated insecurity, an inability to believe that power is truly yours unless you snatch it with your own hands? By crowning yourself, you declare yourself master of history, bypassing heaven itself. It is the quintessential fait accompli. But power taken by force, unbound by any higher authority or shared legitimacy, often requires constant force to maintain. It is a brilliant, breathtaking move that simultaneously creates an empire and, perhaps, begins to lay the psychological groundwork for its eventual, inevitable trap. The weight of the crown settles, a heavy promise and a heavier burden. You are perched high on the imperial throne, a figure elevated above the assembled thousands, bathed in the filtered light of Notre Dame. The noise of the preceding ritual fades as you prepare for the final, critical act. Your hand rests on the Gospels, a potent symbol, a calculated nod to tradition, and the powerful concordat you brokered. This is the moment the deal is sealed, not just with the church or the people, but with history itself. And then you speak the words, not just a simple affirmation, but a structured oath. You swear to uphold the territorial integrity of the empire you have forged. You swear to respect the concordat, maintaining peace with Rome. And then comes the phrase that hangs in the air, a stark, almost jarring echo of the revolution you've just crowned yourself above. You swear to maintain the equality of rights. Consider the breathtaking irony of that pledge. Spoken by a hereditary emperor, progenitor of a new nobility, from a golden throne. It's a masterclass in the ultimate flexibility, perhaps hypocrisy, of ambition. It will say anything required in the critical moment of consolidation. The great space holds its breath, the echo of the impossible oath fading. And then the roar erupts. Vive l'Empereur! It swells, a wave of sound, a thunderous acclamation that fills every corner of the cathedral. Is it genuine adoration from every throat? Or is it the predictable, perhaps coerced, response of a nation trained in swift obedience? The truth is likely a complex mix, but the sound itself is undeniable. It is the sound of power ratified, of a political transformation being officially and seemingly irreversibly cemented. This scene reveals a profound insight into the mechanics of formalizing power. It requires ritual, declared purpose, even if that purpose contains fundamental contradictions. You had to pay lip service to the ideals of the revolution, even as you buried them under the weight of this imperial mantle. Leaders often use the language of past, powerful movements, while pursuing agendas that fundamentally betray those movements. Look at this moment, the self-crowned emperor swearing to equality. What does this scene tell you about the promises made on the ascent to absolute power? The acclamation wasn't just noise. It was the definitive sound of a nation accepting its fate under a new, contradictory dawn. Beside you, now kneeling before you on the steps of the altar, is Josephine. The weight of your own crown has just settled, a physical anchor to the imperial throne you've just seized. Now it is her turn. You lift the second diadem, a delicate, shimmering circlet compared to your own laurel wreath of gold. The air hangs heavy with incense and expectation. She is crowned, not by her own hand, that would be unthinkable here, but by yours. As you place the crown upon her dark curls, she rises, no longer merely Madame de Beauharnais or even Madame Bonaparte, but Empress Josephine. Her journey, you know, has been as improbable and remarkable as your own ascent. From a Creole widow navigating the treacherous social currents of revolutionary Paris, facing the terrifying specter of the guillotine, she has risen to the absolute zenith of European royalty. Her presence here, in this moment, is strategically vital. She provides continuity, a personal link to the man who was the celebrated First Consul, smoothing the jagged edges of the new empire with a veneer of familiar grace. She represents the softer, albeit gilded side of the regime, the domestic face of absolute power. David will capture this scene in paint, freezing the moment you place the crown, showcasing her beauty, her elegance, her regal bearing, a consort elevated not by bloodline, but entirely by your will. A reflection of your own self-made kingship. This shared moment, intensely personal in its portrayal, yet utterly public in its execution, reveals a profound insight into the nature of ambitious partnerships under the weight of ultimate power. Even the most intimate relationships become political instruments. Josephine's status, her very identity as empress, is entirely derived from yours, a direct reflection of your ambition and control, a satellite orbiting your sun. Consider the human cost here. Ambition at this level inevitably reshapes personal bonds, turning partners into symbolic figures within the larger drama of power. their roles dictated by the needs of the empire, not the heart. Her coronation wasn't merely a spousal gesture, an act of affection before God and man. It was another decisive act of asserting your sole authority. Just as you took the crown from the Pope's hands and placed it upon your own head, signaling your independence and supremacy, you placed the crown on hers. You made her empress, just as you made yourself emperor. What does it mean for a relationship when one person's very status is a creation of the other's will? Ask yourself, is this the ultimate expression of shared destiny, or the stark reality of power-consuming love? It is a quiet, chilling truth beneath the splendor. Her elevation is proof not just of your love, but of your total control. Across the gilded halls of Vienna, through the snow-dusted palaces of St. Petersburg, the news arrives, carried on swift horses and nervous diplomatic pouches. Your coronation, Emperor of the French, a title unheard of since Charlemagne, now worn by a man who rose from Corsican obscurity. The old monarchies receive this not with congratulations, but with a cold, settling dread. In a grand salon, ministers whisper, monarchs frown, tracing imaginary lines on maps that suddenly feel outdated, vulnerable. This wasn't merely France changing governments again. This was a revolution putting on a crown, a general declaring a dynasty. This was you, Napoleon Bonaparte, proclaiming legitimacy in the most audacious way, yet paradoxically highlighting your revolutionary origins in the eyes of those who ruled by divine right. You sought acceptance, but what you achieved, in their eyes, was a declaration of war. Britain, the perpetual thorn in your side, sees their deepest fears materialized. A dominant, ambitious France, now draped in imperial purple, threatens their global power, their trade routes, their very survival as an island nation wary of continental giants. For Vienna and St. Petersburg, it's a direct assault on their ancient lineage, their God-given right to rule. A self-made emperor from a regicide republic? It is an affront, a dangerous precedent. The scene is almost theatrical. An emperor and his court processing in Notre Dame, miles away, yet casting a long, dark shadow over every royal capital in Europe. It's a moment of collective realization. The temporary peace, the uneasy truces, were merely interludes. The power you consolidated at home, securing your throne with pomp and circumstance, became the catalyst for conflict abroad. Your internal elevation is, in their eyes, an external aggression. You weren't just reigning over France. You were challenging the entire established order, announcing your arrival on the world stage with the thunder of imperial drums. Ask yourself, was this power grab a strategic necessity to unify France? Or was it the ultimate expression of unchecked ambition, a move that inevitably forced Europe's hand? Did the crown promise security? Or did it paint a target on your back? The coronation wasn't just the death knell for the fragile French Republic. It was the opening salvo of a new, brutal chapter of European warfare. Your ambition, once a personal drive, had just rewritten the map of potential battlefields, ensuring that peace would remain, for years to come, a distant and unattainable dream. The empire means war. Section 16. The weight of the crown, price of the principle. The echoes of Notre Dame still ring in your ears, but the grand theater is over. You stand now in the quieter, colder reality of the Tuileries Palace. The heavy, symbolic crown, perhaps momentarily set aside, feels less like an achievement and more like a physical manifestation of the immense burden you've just accepted. You walked out of that cathedral not merely as the first consul of a resurgent republic, but as Napoleon, Emperor of the French. In your mind, you are more, a successor to Charlemagne, a link forged in destiny to Roman emperors of old. Your ambition, once focused on stabilizing France and asserting its power, has morphed. It now demands a grander, dynastic stage. This moment, away from the cheering crowds and the weight of the imperial regalia, is a stark reflection. You traded the ideals of the Republic, the principles that had fueled your initial rise, the promises of liberty and equality that resonated with many, for the perceived security and grandeur of empire. The price was immediate and steep. Sincere Republicans, those who had followed you through the Directory and the Consulate, hoping for the fulfillment of revolutionary ideals, felt betrayed. They saw the imperial sash as a rejection of everything they fought for, a return to the very monarchy the revolution had overthrown. Europe's monarchs, who had grudgingly dealt with the Republic, now faced an ambitious, self-made emperor who sought legitimacy through conquest and dynastic claims. Their opposition hardened, transforming political rivalry into an existential threat. The most profound consequence, however, is the path you've locked yourself onto. This empire, born not of inheritance but of war and self-assertion, demands constant validation. It requires a continuous state of expansion, or at least assertion of power, to maintain its legitimacy. The crown wasn't just a symbol of achievement, it was a self-forged yoke, binding you to a future written in blood, built on the foundations of a betrayed past. The principle of self-made power, fully realized, necessitates unending conflict to sustain itself. The security you sought in elevating yourself to emperor is illusory. It necessitates perpetual insecurity for your neighbors, inevitably leading to their unified resistance. Here, in the quiet after the storm, the chilling clarity settles. Attaining ultimate power often requires sacrificing the very principles that empowered the rise, imposing a heavier, inescapable burden of maintaining that status. Ask yourself, was this the zenith of calculated ambition, or the moment you traded true freedom for a golden cage of your own making, committing France and yourself to a destiny defined by the weight of that crown? Step back from the gold and velvet of Notre Dame, the echoes of that day, December 2nd, 1804. You, Napoleon, stand crowned not by pope or people, but by your own hand. It's a moment steeped in irony. The revolutionary general, the champion of the people, chooses an ancient path, the hereditary crown, for his modern power. You trade the dynamic instability of a republic, the very furnace that forged you, for the perceived solid ground of dynastic rule. This security is bought with betrayed ideals, guaranteed only by force. It reveals naked ambition, reaching its zenith, believing it can command history, legitimize itself by sheer will, and find ultimate security in absolute control. It is the chilling belief that being indispensable justifies becoming sovereign over all, including the revolutionary people, who were the source of your initial rise. What does this turning point teach us? More than just the allure of power, it exposes the deep insecurity that often drives the demand for absolute control. The recent assassination attempts, like the bombing on Rue Saint-Nicaise, undoubtedly fueled this paranoia, twisting a desire for order into a need for unchallengeable authority. It highlights a willingness to sacrifice founding principles, liberty, equality, fraternity, for perceived stability or personal glory. And it shows how easily a populace, exhausted by upheaval and craving order, can acquiesce to the dismantling of their hard-won freedoms, exchanging rights for quiet. Ask yourself, what if he hadn't crowned himself? Would the wars that followed have been less inevitable without the burden of a fragile dynasty to defend? Would his legacy be different, perhaps remembered more as a great administrator than a ceaseless conqueror? History offers no simple counterfactuals, but it vividly shows the profound consequence of this choice. It cemented the shift from First Consul of a republic to Emperor of a new French empire, an act that reassured old monarchies while alienating fervent republicans, sowing the seeds for future conflicts both within France and across Europe. Look around today. Do you see echoes of this ambition? Leaders who believe they are above the rules they impose, who seek to dismantle checks and balances on their power, who use spectacle and manufactured consent to legitimize their authority, claiming indispensability? The struggle between the yearning for liberty and the comfort of a strong hand, between shared ideals and individual dominance, is eternal. The shadow of Napoleon's eagle still falls across our world, a stark reminder that ambition, unchecked and unchallenged, rarely rests until it has built its throne, even if that throne is ultimately built on the ruins of a dream. As Napoleon himself knew, perhaps too well, ambition never rests. March right on when his heart is heavy. The ultimate lesson from this pinnacle of power isn't just about one man's rise and fall. It's a timeless caution about the seductive whisper of absolute control, the price of security bought with freedom, and how easily principles can be cast aside on the altar of personal ambition. History doesn't repeat, but it echoes, offering hard-won wisdom if we choose to listen. In Napoleon's ascent to emperor, we see a profound truth. The greatest empires are often built on contradictions, and the most absolute power is sometimes pursued by the most insecure men. In the end, perhaps it wasn't the frost of Russia or the armies of Europe that sealed his fate, but the very moment he believed he could seize the heavens and place their stars upon his own head.